Good morning, everybody. How's that sound? Everybody can hear okay? We put the speakers on the floor, and sometimes we put them up if there's a really big crowd, so you get the sonic waves. But it's just Saturday morning, so we thought we'd give you a break. I'm Brandon Reintjes. I'm the senior curator here at the Missoula Art Museum. Thank you so much for coming to this event. We're really excited to have a wonderful crowd for the reception last night, and then also for this morning, this talk with Terran. We're really pleased. Terran made the long journey to Missoula and is here with us today, as well as Samantha and so many of Terran's family. So thank you all for making the trip. I wanted to, the show really came about as a kind of a gift. It wasn't a show that we were looking for, but Terran's name kept popping up over and over again. Initially from Jean Quick to C. Smith, she said, "You've got to keep track of this one." And anytime Jean says that, I file it away, and I visit his website from time to time. And then Neil was talking about how what a talented artist Terran was. And then I visited Blackfeet Community College, BCC, and in Erin Laframboise' office, she had a little picture of Terran's, and she said, "This is one of my favorite pieces." It was like she had an art gallery in her office. And I said, "Oh, is that, what's that guy's name again? Is that Terran Last Gun?" And she said, "Yeah, he's from here, you know." And I said, "Oh, I know." So you could tell that she was so excited about the work, and I was able to see the way that work connected with people, and I thought, man, we should do a MAM show, and it was really wonderful that Terran accepted our invitation. The gallery that you're in is a dedicated gallery to advancing contemporary Native art. So we always have this dedicated gallery. We always have a show by an artist, a contemporary Native artist who's doing wonderful things. And that was a dedication that we made in 2006 as the museum expanded, and we built this place. And that special dedication was really making sure that we always were committed to contemporary Native voices, really figuring out who the rising stars were, what the dialogue was, how to have those kind of conversations. And then we also have that focus in our collection as well. We have a dedication within our collection that collects contemporary Native art. And I think those are both important dedications to maintain, partly because MAM is here in this confluence of 5 valleys. And this is the home of the Salish and the Kalispel, the Salish and the Upper Kalispel or Pend Oreille people. And most of you know that we're about 20 miles south of the reservation border, the CSKT, Confederated Salish Kootenai tribes. And sometimes this sounds like a little bit of a rote land acknowledgement, like, okay, thank you for coming. Here we are on the site of, but really this is enacted through those dedications and the way that we connect with people and the way we maintain friendships. And you can see it in our community. I don't think this is a local crowd, but when you travel outside of Montana and you give land acknowledgements like that, people don't realize that just over at the University of Montana was the place where horses grazed, or Salish elders would say the site, the confluence of the Rattlesnake Creek and the Clark Fork River was where bull trout were caught, and there's big fishing. Or that the best places to collect bitterroot are now covered with box stores on Reserve Avenue. So things like that, but it's important to remember, and it's not just past tense. You can think about contemporary Native culture as vibrant, and even things like last night, the MMIP, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous People Rally that was happening at the University of Montana, and I hope you're able to go to that. Terran received his BFA in Museum Studies and was on a completely different course of action up at Blackfeet Community College first. Got involved with Museum Studies at IAI in Santa Fe, and then turned to visual art at the suggestion that he connect more deeply to creation, that act of creation, and I think that's really incredible. He's won just about every award you can think about winning as a young, dedicated artist, and received awards from the First People's Fund, the 2020 Artist and Business Leadership Fellowship, the Santa Fe Art Institute 2018 Story Maps Fellowship, and named just last year one of the 12 New Mexico artists to know in the Southwest. He's participated in Indian Market several times, winning awards as well in Santa Fe, and got in again this year. Congratulations. So that's a big mark of distinction. And he's probably going to sweep like all the awards categories this year, so just wait. You can see where he goes there. I did, in addition to thanking his family for coming and Samantha, I did want to say thank you to the galleries. I know that they're not represented here, but it was really a delight to work with your galleries. They're extremely professional and extremely supportive, and that's exactly what artists need, especially Hozo and Ho, who provided loans for the exhibition. Especially, even though Terran's from Montana, getting work from other places is really difficult in kind of assembling a show, and it often takes that support of a community or the support of galleries to make that happen. So it's with a special gratitude that all of that comes together. Lastly, it's just a note here, please silence your cell phones. Did I miss anything on the introduction?
No, that's really great.
Yeah, I was trying to be thorough, but not bore people at the same time. So it's kind of it's always a balance. But we've had such good conversations about your artwork, and it's really interesting to see there's maybe 4 major series here, and you kind of tend to work in series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this show consists of sort of these mini bodies of work that I like to work in. And that really comes from my printmaking background and working with multiples, these limited editions. And so when I started working with ledger drawings, I worked in a similar manner where I'm using one sort of shape or image, but then changing the color schemes, which really makes each work individual. But the works, the earliest works are the square serigraphs. They're from 2019. All the paper bags are from 2020, and some of the larger ledgers is from last year, and then all the half circle, half discs that go off the paper are this year. So a good past 4 years of works that I'm actually very proud of. These were some successful works that I was able to have come to the MAM and be exhibited and share with everyone.
And you talk about these earlier pieces, or the first pieces, as kind of being doors or openings?
Yeah, they're definitely inspired by doorways, and as people can read on my website or even the text panels, I'm very much inspired by Blackfoot painted lodges. They're from my tribe, so I'm Piikani or Blackfeet, but we're part of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and that includes Gana, Siksika, North Piikani, and they're in Canada, and then us, South Piikani, or just Piikani. And we all speak Blackfoot language, and we all share a common painted design and symbols on how we paint the lodge cover, or the teepee, as other people know it, but I prefer lodge. And so those designs are something that I've invested a lot of time into researching, visiting actual lodge owners. I'm very much interested in Blackfoot research versus non-Blackfoot research on these lodges, and Cecile Blackboy and Victor Peppian are some of those people I go back to. Howard Peppian. And then my father, Terran Last Gun, he uses these lodge symbols, those geometric ones. That's what I was really drawn to, and that's what I'm sort of working with here, is my visual vocabulary that I've developed.
It seems like in the show there's a couple different streams of influence. There's you think about modernism, and there's artists that you admire who are non-Indigenous, and then there's also the ledger art tradition, and that kind of comes together. And then there's the lodge influence and the Warshert.
Yeah, so my other influences are definitely art movements such as op art, pop art for the color. Even the paper bags were inspired by some artists that were working with those, such as Roy Lichtenstein, Andy Warhol. but also geometric abstraction and hard edge and color field. Frank Stella, his early works, those are some of my favorite works to go back to and look at and just read and listen to his thoughts on what he called shaping and using these shapes. And I really liked that idea, and I've sort of thought of that when I'm in the studio working, this idea of creating shapes, but also activating those shapes through color is what I like to do as well.
My wife hadn't seen the show and met you for the first time last night. And when we were home last night and I was tucking her in, she said, "That was a great show. Does he look at a lot of early Frank Stella?" Because Frank Stella is one of her favorites, and especially early Frank Stella. And I said, "Yeah, of course, you can see that influence right away in Joseph Albers and kind of thinking about
Right.
it. And it's really interesting to think about all those things coming together. Do you pick your influences? Like, when you are looking at artists, are you focused on shape and color and design, or do those influences kind of pick you from the history?
I think it's kind of both. Mm-hmm. I'm definitely choosing these artists just based, and with Frank Stella, it's more of his early work, so it's very specific to that minimalist take and not his maximalist, which is more today.
Like a 5 or 10 year period.
Yeah. And one artist I really want to mention is the late Jeff Cam. He's Plains Cree artist, and he really focused on indigenous abstraction and also in Australia, Aboriginal artists, they work with this idea of indigenous abstraction where, yes, it does look abstract, but it's actually a map to a lake or something, or these are they're layered in meaning, and I think that's where my work falls into is it's full of these stories and experiences, but yet it is playing with abstraction and color and geometric shapes. So
yeah, I think when you talk about the stories and the narrative, it's some people, it's unexpected a little bit, but one of the things you just talked about with Aboriginal abstraction and painting is it has to do with the land. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at your titles and you really think about the way that you've broken down the 3 tiers of lodge design,
yes,
that it has so much to do with the land. Is that how you think about it?
Yeah, so the painted lodges they can be viewed in a 3-tier structure. Not all of them are like that, but most are. And the bottom represents the land, which I've pulled inspiration from a lot of. And the middle is usually a spirit animal or a spirit being, some type of helper or authority. And that's very unique to those owners, and that's who helps them and guides them in a sense. And then the top is the cosmos. And so for Blackfoot people, we're very much connected to land and the universe. And those symbols on the top are constellations, the Big Dipper, the Pleiades, Morning Star, which is represented by Venus. And also, he's not on there, but Scarface, and he's represented by Jupiter. And so for Blackfoot people, we had all these stories with the universe. And I think that just has really fueled my imagination when I look into the research and just begin to realize, our entire worldview can be looked at on those lodges, and in our connection to animals, to the land, to weather elements, all of that, and to stars. And then you start to learn about star and people interactions. So I really have pulled a lot from those and very much inspired by even current owners of those. And it's great to see them slowly being revived and brought back, because most, they weren't very common for a while there, and they're actually in museum collections, university collections, which is very sad once I started to learn about that throughout my research. And how could these come back? Is it even able to? Mm-hmm. And what I did learn was that, although those are in collections, if that family wanted to revive it, they could do it on their own and put it on a whole entirely new cover and have it transferred. And so that really gave me hope in that, you know, they can keep that and we can continue on and make new stuff and just this, it's a continuum that we don't, you know, if we can't get those back, then that's just how it goes.
And they're not lost.
Yeah.
There's no sense of a lost culture or something.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I was really struck by talking to you about was that your interpretation. There's so much talent coming from the culture right now, the Piikani culture, and that you described it almost as a revitalization or a
Mhm.
renaissance.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I'm always thinking about the history and archaeological history, so 10,000 years back of Montana and Alberta history, and Blackfoot people have been here for that time. And up until today, you know, even the last 100 years, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of hardships that we had to overcome and obstacles. But today, you know, it's not like that. We're not confined to just this reservation boundary. We're able to be, you know, sovereign. And there's this idea of visual sovereignty that some people have been talking about in Indigenous curators. And I feel that resonates with my work today, that it is this form of sovereignty, of reinserting ourselves and reestablishing ourselves, and just letting people know that, you know, we have artists as well from our community, and this is what we're doing, and we can compete just as well with everyone. But in terms of the culture, the societies, all of those seem to be slowly flourishing in Browning on the Blackfeet Reservation and throughout the Confederacy. So, but there's still things to do. There's still challenges, of course,
A
and
lot of work to do.
but it is happening. NAGPRA has helped us with repatriation, getting bundles back. So I think where I'm trying to add to some of the, like you said, the Renaissance, the beauty of who we are as Piikani people is what I'm trying to share with people with my art.
No, that's great. I'm so glad you brought up visual sovereignty, and I've been having this discussion with somebody about sovereignty. Sometimes I think is really difficult to think from a non-Indigenous perspective. You know, the definition of sovereignty is the absolute right to govern, or something like that. You know, close to that. And I think when you think about sovereignty and the way that it gets enacted from an Indigenous perspective is there's a multiplicity of sovereignties, and visual sovereignty is one expression,
Right.
and they're indistinguishable from each other and interconnected, and sometimes they are expressed in one way. Or what when you think about sovereignty from the way that you just used it, that visual sovereignty, what does that mean?
I guess just sort of, you know, a lot of this work goes back to the painted lodges and thinking about those designs, how they're very unique to us. And I'm trying to use them, but in a more modern way, in a more contemporary way of like, this is continuation, this is continuum, but it's also the future, it's present, but I think across timelines, you know, the last 10,000 years and then the next 10,000, and I'm right in the middle. And so what are these experiences like? And that's what comes to mind when I think of visual sovereignty and us sharing with people, like, this is, you know, contemporary Indigenous art, this is what's being produced today from me, from my own personal experience. And I embed these experiences into the work, and so I guess that's sort of another way of sovereignty entering the work and being embedded in it.
Yeah, that's an amazing definition.
And also at one point, the ledger drawings too. So some of these are from New Mexico and Texas, but others are from Montana, Choteau, Montana, Missoula County. And I think there's something interesting when you have these old documents, you look at the dates of 1913, 1920s, early 1900s, and for us, Piikani, Blackfeet, we were going through hardships at that time. But now I have this document and I'm not vandalizing it, but I'm adding my, we're re-adding to like playing with history, all these different layers. And I think about, and I'm not trying to be harsh on anything about, the history is the history, and it's all about today and moving forward. But there's just something about adding to these documents that, show to Montana that was our traditional territory, and we got pushed out and forced out. And there's something about having that document from that place, and now I'm adding my, visual imagery to it. I think about that, and I think it's just an interesting place to be today.
No, when you think about that as some of the darkest history of colonization in the early 1900s, and everything that was happening with incarceration and coming out of boarding schools, and I think you reclaiming and reusing some of those documents, and all ledger artists who are using some of these sheets and ledgers and certificates and bonds and currency from that dark period, it's an act of agency too. It's that.
Yeah. And it's interesting too when you look at the ledger paper when I'm working with it in my studio. There's watermarks on them, and they're from these East Coast paper mills from the late mid 1800s, late 1800s, and that's just a whole nother layer of American history and just the invasion in a sense from our perspective. And so I think of all of that, and these paper mills are no longer in existence. But I find them through the National Registry of Watermarks, and that's just another layer to the work that I don't hear other ledger artists really talk about. But that these paper, they've had their own life throughout history, and now they're in the hands of indigenous artists who are working with it. It's non-indigenous artists are also working with ledger, but we have a very unique and specific history tied to ledger, and I think that needs to be, first and foremost known to people is like we're the ones who were working with this and documenting and recording, and previous to that was on hides, and so this was just a new form of material to use.
Kind of moving from those winter counts forward, and then working with the paper and the ledgers. You never feel like you're working against history though. You're always kind of you're comfortable working within a tradition, and then I think that you're comfortable innovating on that tradition.
Yes.
Too.
Yeah. No, I think it's fun to look into all these histories, whether they're good or bad. It's good to know what was going on, and I like to keep it broad in terms of America and North America. And since Blackfoot Confederacy, we're in Montana and Alberta, and then we got split and cut off from each other when the border was created. So that's why I involve North America when I think of my work, and it definitely reflects the land of Montana, more so the plains and the Rocky Mountains and these flat lines and big sky that we have on that side. And at nighttime, we're pretty rural in Browning, but you can see so many stars, so you can see why we were so connected to the star world, to the universe.
So a piece like this, it starts 10,000 years ago, and then it goes 10,000 years in the future, and it goes from the Arctic Circle to the Arctic Circle. Is that about right?
Yeah, and then straight into the universe.
That's right. I think it's pretty amazing. How often, you've told me some of the specific stories behind specific pieces, and some of those are stories that you tell about going out on an adventure and walking up a mountain. But then other stories you've talked about are stories that you've heard or inherited or listened to. How does the work split between stories that you've received from other people versus stories that are being generated through your own experience?
Yeah, no, so they're based on experiences and stories, like you said, and they're personal or they're family members that I'm thinking of. And these square works, I'm not on all the painted lodges, but on some there's this square or rectangle on the backside that symbolizes a door, and I was very much drawn to that shape. And it made me think of how you can be hiking or walking somewhere and you just encounter these beautiful, unique places, you know, all throughout Montana,
Yeah.
but specifically Piikani territory. And I guess I was just imagining like what, you know, there's these doorways out there, spiritual doorways, these just unique encounters of a place that really has an impact on you as a human. And I wanted to work with that shape and that idea of a door and being out on the plains. And so the flat lines on the bottom, that symbolizes the ground, the sakgum or earth, and then the doorway of experiences of being out in the landscape. Just, you know, one of them is titled Wandering Across the Plains. And then another one is Old Land, New Journeys. And so it's thinking of Montana's history of the human experience here is really old and ancient, but we also are still creating new experiences, so new journeys, and that's where that came into play. And some of the works are definitely inspired by family members' experiences, such as my father. And I just really, I guess, am proud of his accolades that he's achieved and his successes, not only in the art world, but our societies, our culture. And so I think of those good experiences, and that will influence a title as well.
Do you ever feel weighed down by the responsibility to carry culture forward?
Not really. I think it's just innate to who I am, being that I was born and raised in Browning. But I feel, I guess, a sense of responsibility to share and to continue on our visuals in new ways. I hadn't really seen anyone, I hadn't heard really any artists talk about our painted lodges from an art historical sort of discussion, and I took that upon myself to really investigate and research that, and just came to realize that our lodges were, you know, Great Plains classic art, like North American art.
Yeah.
And the idea of painting from humans and drawing, you know, that's been in North America for thousands of years. And so, because I think growing up, just before attending II, my thoughts on painting was just, you know, Western European, like that's where it all started, that's where it was. But I realized looking into this, I was like, well, actually we're doing the same thing. We were doing geometric abstraction. And
for hundreds.
Yeah,
hundreds
and then the petroglyphs, pictographs, rock effigies that are on the landscape of Montana on the plains, using rocks. You know, it's just so fascinating to think about the creativity that was happening here for a long time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. The thinking about some of the shapes. Do you always have to find a precedent within a visual tradition, or with some of those shapes that you're doing that are broken shapes, you're kind of thinking about ways of making shapes in new ways?
Well, in the beginning, I was, like I said, drawn to the bottom, which was the land, and the top, which was the sky. And so I was working with those specific shapes. And now the work has slowly progressed and developed into reconfiguring it a little and taking fragments out and working with these shapes differently. And that's, I think, the color actually has really become a focus of mine, where I'm working with these specific color schemes, you know, warm and cool colors to create vibration. And when I finish the piece, I sit with it, and then that's when the titles come. And so I wait till each work is done, and then I'll sit with it and write things down, keywords, and then pull which ones make sense to create these titles. And so that's the process of titling all the works, even, you know, any medium, whatever I'm working with.
Is that an arduous process or an enjoyable one? Because so many people have come in and really appreciated the titles and really connected to the words as well as the art.
It's time consuming, but it really.
Do you ever get help?
Sometimes, but yeah, I'll that's part of the process. Well, the color, that's Samantha helps me choose color sometimes. But the titles is where it's just solely me as the artist and figuring that out on my own. And I really appreciate other artists who really take the time on their titles and have long titles too sometimes. I think that's really interesting. But it really helps me to think about my work. It helps me to talk about my work, explain it by writing down what's coming to mind, and that's from anything to like the colors. They make me think of the yellow one. Makes me think of the sun, the creator. So this like intense energy. That's what I think about when I see yellow and red is such a powerful color too. It makes me think of the red ochre that's been around for thousands of years and has been just a very unique to indigenous people to use that and paint our faces. And so that's part of it as well.
I think I just recently read a quote by somebody that the use of ochre is one of the things that binds us as human beings. And I thought, man, that is powerful when you think about that urge to make art and to use ochre. And I thought, wow, that's a great quote. There's so much specificity in the titles sometimes, but then they lead you in a place. And as we were hanging the show and preparing the labels, I was so glad that it wasn't like square number 1.
Yeah.
Circle number 34. This is really great that it is so suggestive and takes us to a place.
Yeah, and I want to be able to allow the viewer to, take in the art on their own, and the title just adds to that experience that their viewing experience. And it's great to hear from the artist, of course, explain the works, but I'm also interested in people just viewing and experiencing the work on their own.
Yeah, and I think sometimes geometric abstraction is a hard in for some people. It's either alternately described as stark or cold, or there's other descriptors about that, and I think sometimes people don't realize that there's a narrative or a tradition or a cultural angle.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think about geometry?
I think geometric shapes are, the simple ones, the circle, the triangle, the square. They're such powerful little shapes, and even the circle, we see it all over. Our eyes are circles, and the moon and sun, so we see this throughout our human experience. And then growing up in Browning, seeing the Rocky Mountains, they all have triangle peaks, and so you could see why we were doing triangle peaks at the bottom to represent our territory, our land there. And I'm very much always been drawn to shapes for some reason and hard edge things, and I was trying to figure out why was that, and I think I kind of realized that maybe it was from these painted lodges and seeing those shapes growing up, and seeing it in my dad's work over time as well. It really just allowed me to begin that investigation further of how are we using shapes? What did these shapes mean? What does the color mean? Does it mean anything? And then adding all of my own to it.
And you said that there's a misperception sometimes from people who aren't in the community that painted lodges are everywhere, that you could throw a rock and hit a painted lodge, that they're very specific and pretty rare. And
they're very rare. So if you had a camp of 300, there'd only be 10 painted lodges. And they were never to be duplicated or copied, out of fear of something negative happening to you for doing that. And they're all transferred. So anything transferred, that's theirs, and they've been transferred that, and they had their face painted. And so I really admire that part of it. There's all these sort of protocols, to follow, and so that's why I'm not entirely replicating a lodge. I'm only pulling certain parts from it, and I haven't really worked with that middle area like other Piikani Blackfeet artists have, the animal world and the weather, I guess, world and these different helpers, authorities.
You're not referencing directly, you're just looking at different aspects and different broader symbols and uses.
Yeah, I've tried to focus on just certain areas of land and sky and working with letting those ideas guide me and not completely trying to duplicate a lodge or anything like that. But and it's interesting that just the history of them is they're like living art pieces. They help that family, they heal them, they keep them protected. And when a cover is worn out, you know, you can remake a new one and sink those in the lake, or, you know, historically they'd put them out on the plains. And so that's interesting too, giving them back. They came from the water world, the Suita peaks, and the water beings is, from what I heard and what I was told, where these lodges came from, these painted ones. And so that's why they get given back to the water beings or to the sun, the creator.
And so, in a sense, the physical lodge cover isn't important. It's the design, and it's the authority to use that design and be able to transfer it within the family and put it
It
on
just
the lodge.
becomes reactivated. You know, when it's repainted.
Yeah. Yeah, I love those themes in your work of reactivation and connection and continuity, and seeing these when you talk specifically about colors and the way colors affect you or affect us as the non-artist, that broad sense of yellow or that red or what those pieces do. I think that there's such powerful themes in the work. It's really kind of amazing to see. When you walked in the gallery and the pieces were all mixed up out of their series, how did that make you feel?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of keeping the works together because of you know, they're all the same dimension. But it was so great to see them broke up like this, and it allowed me to sort of think about my work from the past 4 years and really reflect on it in a different way, and seeing this body of work together for the first time was really special, and I really like how it turned out, for sure.
We asked Terran for permission, by the way, before we did this. we conferred with him just to see if he would be open to a different presentation, because I think that's part of the fun.
Yeah, I love it when the work has room to breathe, and it's just, it's great when you can see sort of that nice spacing.
Yeah. Do you mind speaking a little bit about the Cutswood School and the work that you did there with language immersion that was founded by your late uncle?
Yeah, so the Piikani Institute was co-founded by my late uncle Daryl Ropes Kip, and they have language immersion school programs there. The one I attended was called the Lost Children School, but they mainly manage the Cutswood School, and it's for younger children. That is from, I believe, 1st grade to 8th grade. And I attended from 5th grade to 7th grade. And that really instilled in me my culture, the language, of course, but also these cultural narratives that we have, and thinking about how those are actually tied to the lodges too, such as the Lost Children, the Big Dipper, and the Pleiades, is another story of children. And that was just such a great experience to be there, to be with other kids my age, learning our language. And so my Blackfoot name, it means last gun, and that was transferred to me when I was about 10 years old at a bundle opening. And so, you know, that's basically your first transfer as a Blackfoot person, is your name. And that's what I go by now for my last name. You know, I changed it to my Blackfoot name, Last Gun. And so I've tried to continue to learn the language. It is a little hard being away from home, but it's great when I can like take a class on our language BCC had offered online Blackfoot courses that really helped me and really connected me to my own community of Browning, but also the Blackfoot Confederacy in a really unique and different way, and that was because of the pandemic. And then I also wanted to note that I co-taught a course at BCC on lodges. It was called Nitoyes, and that's lodges for us, our lodge. And I presented with Helen Ozier Carlson, and she's a lodge owner, her and her husband, and Leonard Weasel, a traveler who is from North Piikani, and him and his wife are lodge owners, and he's an elder. And so we had these 3 generations of Piikani people presenting about our lodges, and so I learned so much from them because they were actual lodge owners, and that was just such a great experience. And it's archived away through BCC as well.
That's quite an honor. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I didn't know that you had that opportunity. I really like to hear about that. That's pretty incredible. When you think about the experiences that you had with the school and learning the language, is it fair to say that all the work starts there, or is that an overstatement?
Some of the work starts there, and also growing up, I danced. I danced at powwows, and so that has influenced me in terms of thinking about powwow dancing and how that's performance art in a sense. And part of our ceremonies is dancing too, in these different animal gestures, and so I have to credit that as well. And even for color, it's all about color in the powwow world. Like, what's your next regalia going to look like in terms of color? And so that influenced my work in thinking about it. Now, it's definitely, I got to credit that experience plus the Cutswood School, the Pagan Institute, and then the Blackfeet Community College. That was the last place that really was, that's one of my favorite places in my community, is to go to the Blackfeet Community College. I learned so much there too in terms of our culture. And the Nitoyes course was organized by Carla Bird, who's here today. Just want to give her a shout out. And she really made a huge impact there. And it was amazing to work with her and the other community members as well.
That's fantastic. Can you talk a little bit about some of the projects that you have coming up next?
Yeah, so I like to do art markets. So I'm getting ready for Native Treasures Art Market in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's you get juried in, and the markets down there in terms of indigenous or native markets, it's really great to see everyone's they're such great artists and so many different mediums, pottery, sculpture, wood carvings, and it's just great to be around that energy of these different artists working and taking their work so serious. And so I'm excited to be in that show. I'll be doing ledger drawings for that. And then I also got juried into the Swaya Santa Fe Indian Market, and that's the largest Indian native market in the United States and probably North America. And they have a huge best of show where artists are allowed to submit 2 works, their best works. And so I submitted last year the diptych ledger drawing, which won first for ledger drawing and best of Division A. And then I submitted the very large serigraph back there, the big discs one. And that one won first in the serigraph category. And so it's nice to get that recognition from my own, sort of peers and community down there now, which is my home away from home. And so those are what are coming up in terms of markets. Those are some of my favorite ones to do, and there's just so many people around, and networking is a huge thing there, and that's how I've made many connections through those. And also I'm in a group show at the Museum of the Plains Indian in Browning, Montana, which is my hometown. That one opens June 3rd and will be up through August. So I'm excited for that one. I'm doing some ledger drawings for that that'll be shipping out next week. And yeah, I'm in 4 other group shows. One that opens in November at the brand new gallery in Kalispell called Good Luck Gallery. So I'll be there, and I'm excited to kind of get connected in West Montana specifically, but back in Montana. And so I'm thankful for that. And then also at the Bates College Museum of Art, which is in Maine, I believe. Massachusetts, I think it is. Yeah. So I'm in a group show there. A number of well-known artists that are going to be in that group show, and that'll open in November as well. And I mean, I could keep going on with things, but I have a solo exhibition opening this fall at K Art Gallery, which is one of my galleries I work with in Buffalo, New York. So it's my first solo show with them that I'll be preparing for, and I'm very excited for that. And then the last thing is I got accepted to be into the Anderson Ranch Visiting Artist Program in Colorado.
That's
yes,
great.
So I'll be joining them in November for 2 weeks, and I'm pretty excited for that. Also nervous because I haven't really done anything like that where I'm going to be away that long with strangers by myself.
Is that focused on is that a print residency that you're focused on, or?
It's going to be a ledger. Yeah,
That'd
so I'll be
great.
doing ledger drawings for them, doing some public programs, and we'll see how it goes. I'm excited. I think it's going to be pretty interesting.
And then when's the Hockaday show coming up?
And yeah, lastly, the Hockaday, which is in April of 2024. It's a solo exhibition at the Hockaday Museum of Art in Kalispell. I'll be doing a mural, part of that, a temporary mural in the gallery space. And some of the works in here will be traveling to that show, and I'll also be doing new works. And so I'm really excited for that, which, it's just great to have these sort of different opportunities right now in Montana, my home state.
That's really great. Are you okay if we open it up to questions?
Yeah, let's do that.
Does anybody want to? Oh, right away. I didn't even get to finish, Catherine. Go ahead.
I just was hoping maybe you could just say a few more words about your use of color and talk about it. Is it? Would you say it's a combination of symbolic and intuitive, purely visual, traditional?
Yeah, no, I think it's very intuitive. It's also based on op art. I was really drawn to op art for the complementary colors, the black and white, these colors that create tension and vibration. And also doing my own research into just color play in general. And so I work with a number of color schemes, complementary, of course, split complementary, triad, tetrad. These are all, the color wheel is probably one of my biggest tools I use in the studio, and I'm constantly looking at it and figuring out color schemes to work with and trying to create harmony. So, color harmony is something I'm really interested in, interaction and play, and just how they activate each other too. They create this energy when using certain colors. And, sometimes I'm really drawn to some of the works. I'm like, oh, this is a great one. But then others, I'm like, oh, didn't turn out as quite as I liked. But then people like that one versus the one I like. And that happens with Samantha all the time too, where she likes work, but then it doesn't sell or nothing happens with it. But yeah, colors, that's at this point, especially with the ledger drawings, I work with 3 brands. So Holbein, Faber-Castell, and Pablo. They're all high quality colored pencils, and they all have their own nature of working, but they're all predetermined colors and names. And so it's great I think when I moved to ledger drawings from serigraphs, it really expanded my color knowledge and color vocabulary and how to work with it. Whereas in serigraphs, I was mixing my own colors. I got to that point, and then I started to do this gradation pull where I'm blending the colors. And that was a lot of fun to start to explore that technique. But it's all very intuitive. I just sit there with the colors, and, a general rule is warm and cool color. Usually I'm always, like all of these pretty much are warm and cool color combinations.
A couple of things, actually. I really admire and love that you sit with the work afterwards and name it when that becomes clear. Titles have such an impact for me when I'm enjoying art. And I heard you talk about at age 10, you took the name that was transferred to you.
Mhm.
Is it part of the culture for your cultural group that you wait until a child has reached some age or you have some relationship with the child of just being an infant, like in the Western culture we name a child when pops out?
Yeah, no, my first Blackfoot name was Auchka Somachka, which means running deer. And so that was my kid name. And then I got my sort of, name for the rest of your life. But you could also get another name later too. And I heard too, if a name isn't working out for you, you can change them and get a new name transferred. But my name, Sakwaina Mahka Last Gun, that was my great-great-grandpa Dick Kip's name, and he's a survivor of the Bear River Massacre of 1870, where the U.S. Army, massacred the wrong Blackfoot camp. And my great-great-grandpa Last Gun, along with his sister, survived. And, this was in January 23rd, 40, 50 below zero. So it's just a harsh, tragic history that happened. And so I'm very proud to have that name, to carry it on. That's why I chose to go by it for my last name as well. And I feel, very just proud to have it and sort of a sense of responsibility to do good, try to contribute back. And that's just a little bit on.
In the ma'am write-up on you, you mentioned fences. So when I look at the lines, I'm wondering, is that your fence in front of the door?
I don't know. Maybe that might have been a miscommunication, because fences, it doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, I don't remember that either, Sandy. I was trying to remember where that came from.
Yeah, but in terms of the lines that I'm working with, being at the bottom, they're more for the land itself, the flat land. But on the lodges, such as the diptych ledger drawing, you'll see these bands or bars going around the lodge that symbolize the sky world. And so sometimes, like that diptych, that's what I was going for, but also creating a window to just have an experience by staring at these high contrast black and white colors.
Terran's received great press for this show. Well, great press in general. It's Terran, but the Santa Fe Reporter, the Missoula paper came out as well, and then many of you who are MAM members should have received yesterday in the mail. You noticed that Terran's on the cover of the newsletter, so it's kind of like these three things hit within a week. So it's a little media overload in a good way, but there's some really great text and write-ups about that. Rosella?
Yes, I'm curious about your use. You call it gradation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if you have a cognitive reason to do that, or if it's more just if you have something behind that.
No, I think it was more so based on that, creating those bars and mixing those colors where they meet each other, that I was really interested in exploring more of. And it's called color gradation pull or rainbow pull. I've heard someone last night said something else to me, and I was like, huh? And I was like, I've never heard that one before. But there's, people refer to that technique differently, but it just it creates another dimension into the work, especially when there's the large one over there where it's this bigger disc where the pole, and then I just turned the paper and did different colors. Mm-hmm. And I just really enjoyed how that one turned out.
You printmakers with your terms.
Well, I'll just say, as a viewer, for me personally, I find it brings me into that in-between place with the color,
That's great.
And then I love when you contrast it too with the sharp edge.
Yeah, no, and being a disc or a circle, and having that frame, it's really nice on the brown paper too.
One more thing that I noticed that I think is brilliant is that you're wearing a black and white shirt.
We have a requirement that the artists match the artwork. You can put them together really quickly. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you, Terran, for the show and for making the long journey and for everything you've done for MAM. We're so grateful for everything here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.